It was supposed to be the proudest day of Violetta's life. After 6 years of sleepless nights and grueling exams, she was finally walking across the stage. But as she scanned the crowd for her husband, Kingston, she didn't see a proud partner. She saw a man checking his watch, clutching a manila envelope that would shatter her world. He planned to leave her at the altar of her success, convinced she was a financial burden. Kingston thought he was discarding a dead weight. He had no idea that the cracked phone vibrating in Violetta's pocket held a notification for an $800 million acquisition. He was divorcing a liability, unaware he was walking away from a dynasty. The air conditioning in the Bentley was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but Violetta felt like she was suffocating. She sat in the passenger seat, her hand smoothing the fabric of her graduation gown, careful not to wrinkle the cheap polyester. Beside her, Kingston drove with one hand on the wheel and the other scrolling through his phone, his eyes darting between the screen and the road. "Can you believe the traffic?" Kingston muttered, tossing the phone into the cup holder. "I told you we should have left an hour ago. I have a tea time with the board at 3, Violetta. I can't be stuck watching a bunch of 30-somethings throw hats in the air all afternoon." Violetta looked out the window, watching the manicured lawns of the suburbs blur by. "It's not just a bunch of 30-somethings, Kingston. It's my doctorate. It's the culmination of 6 years of work." 6 years of unpaid work, Kingston corrected, his voice dripping with that familiar condescension. He adjusted his silk tie in the rearview mirror, checking his teeth. 6 years of me paying the mortgage, the bills and your tuition fees while you played scientist in a lab. Do you know how embarrassing it is? When the partners ask what my wife does, and I have to say, "Oh, she's still a student?" It's humiliating. Violetta bit her lip, tasting the metallic tang of blood. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him about the late nights, the breakthrough in synthetic proteins, the patents pending approval in Zurich and Tokyo. But every time she had tried to talk about her work over the last year, Kingston had waved her off, turning up the volume on the television or changing the subject to his golf handicap. "It's almost over, Kingston," she said softly. "After today, everything changes. I promise." Kingston let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Yeah, it changes all right. You'll finally get a job. Maybe bring in 40, 50,000 a year. That barely covers the lease on this car." He didn't know. He couldn't know. Violetta had signed strict non-disclosure agreements. The project she had been leading, Project Ether, wasn't just a university thesis. It was a black box operation funded by private equity, hidden within the university's infrastructure. To Kingston, she was a struggling academic. To the few people in the industry who knew, she was the woman who had just solved the global sustainable preservation crisis. "I might surprise you," Violetta said, a small secret smile touching her lips. Kingston glanced at her, his expression flat. "Violetta, the only way you could surprise me is if you stopped wearing those thrift store shoes. Look at you. You're the wife of a VP at Stratos Banking. Try to look the part today, please. I have investors coming to the ceremony." "Investors? To a graduation?" "They have kids graduating too. Real degrees, business, law, not whatever biology thing you're doing." He sighed, pulling the car up to the curb of the massive university stadium. "Just get out. I'll park the car. Try not to trip on stage." Violetta opened the door, the heat of the June afternoon hitting her face. She stepped out, clutching her cap. "Will you be watching? I'm in the 3rd row." Kingston didn't look at her. He was already typing on his phone again, a smirk playing on his lips that definitely wasn't for her. "I'll be around, Violetta. Just go." As the Bentley pulled away, purring like a large, expensive cat, Violetta felt a vibration in her pocket. She pulled out her cracked iPhone 8. It was a text message from a number with a Swiss country code. "Mr. Rothschild is landing in 20 minutes. The contracts are ready. Do not sign anything else until you speak to us." Violetta took a deep breath, looking at the stadium. Kingston was worried about his image. He had no idea that by sunset, his annual salary would be a rounding error in her bank account. The ceremony was an endless parade of names and applause. Violetta sat in the sea of black gowns, the sun beating down on her shoulders. She scanned the VIP boxes and the bleachers. She saw the parents of her younger classmates, weeping with joy, holding up signs. Finally, she spotted Kingston. He wasn't in the stands. He was standing near the concession tunnel, in the shade, wearing his signature Navy Italian suit, but he wasn't alone. Standing next to him, laughing with her hand on his chest, was Chloe. Violetta felt a cold spike in her stomach. Chloe was Kingston's executive assistant, a 24-year-old with blonde extensions and a penchant for wearing skirts that defied HR regulations. Kingston had sworn a dozen times that she was just efficient, that Violetta was being paranoid and jealous. Why is she here? Violetta thought, her hands trembling in her lap. She watched as Kingston leaned in and whispered something in Chloe's ear. Chloe giggled and handed him a large manila envelope. Kingston took it, his face hardening as he looked toward the stage, though he couldn't possibly see Violetta in the crowd. "Violetta Claremont," the dean announced over the loudspeakers. Violetta snapped back to reality. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She walked toward the stage, her heart pounding, not with excitement, but with dread. As she shook the dean's hand and accepted the scroll, she looked toward the tunnel again. Kingston was watching. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. He was tapping the manila envelope against his leg, like a metronome counting down time. As she exited the stage, trying to navigate the crowd of hugging families, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the Swiss number. "Update. The valuation has been adjusted. Bidding war between BioX and Corp Industries. The floor is now 800 matos. Call us immediately after the ceremony. 800 million. The number was so large it felt abstract. Violetta shoved the phone back into her pocket. She needed to find Kingston. She needed to tell him that their struggles were over, that he didn't need to stress about the mortgage or the car payments ever again. Maybe, just maybe, the stress was why he had been so distant. This money could fix them. She found him near the south exit, away from the crowds. He was checking his reflection in a glass window, adjusting his cufflinks. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. "Kingston!" Violetta called out, breathless, clutching her diploma. "I did it!" Kingston turned slowly. The look in his eyes stopped her dead in her tracks. It was a look of absolute indifference. "Congratulations," he said, the word devoid of any warmth. "You got the piece of paper. Now you can finally contribute to society." "Kingston, listen." She stepped closer, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. "I have something to tell you. Something huge. You won't believe—" "I have something to tell you too, Violetta," he interrupted, his voice sharp. He held up the manila envelope. "And unlike your little science project, this actually matters." He shoved the envelope against her chest. Violetta instinctively grabbed it. "What is this?" "Open it." Violetta's fingers fumbled with the clasp. She pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. The bold text at the top of the first page screamed at her in uppercase letters. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The noise of the cheering graduates faded into a dull roar. "Divorce?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Kingston." "Why?" "Today?" "Because I wanted to make sure you were officially educated before I cut you loose." Kingston sneered, stepping closer to loom over her. I didn't want a judge saying I abandoned a helpless student. You have a PhD now. You're employable, which means I don't have to pay alimony. You planned this? For months, he admitted, checking his watch. Look, Violetta, let's be real. You're boring. You're obsessed with your books and your petri dishes. You don't fit in my world. I need someone who shines at a gala, not someone who smells like formaldehyde. Is this about Chloe? Violetta asked, the tears welling up. Kingston rolled his eyes. Chloe is a part of it. She appreciates success. She supports me. But this is mostly about you being a dead weight. I'm tired of carrying you. He pulled a pen from his inside pocket, a Mont Blanc she had bought him for their 5th anniversary by saving up her stipend for 6 months. Sign the receipt of service, he commanded. My lawyer said if you sign it now, we can expedite the filing. I'm keeping the house, obviously. You can have the Honda Civic. I'll give you 2 weeks to move your boxes out. Violetta looked at the man she had loved for 7 years. The man she had slaved away to surprise. The man she was about to make the husband of a near billionaire. Kingston, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. You are making a mistake, a massive mistake. The only mistake I made was marrying a charity case, he spat. Sign the paper, Violetta. Don't make a scene. You're embarrassing me. Violetta stared at the pen he was thrusting toward her. The sun caught the gold plating, blinding her for a second. Charity case. The words echoed in her mind. She thought about the notification in her pocket. The $800 million. In the state they lived in, assets acquired during the marriage were community property. If the deal closed right now, before she signed anything, Kingston would be entitled to half, $400 million. But he had just served her. He had formally declared the end of their union. He had specified the date of separation as today. A strange calm washed over her. She took the pen. You're sure about this, Kingston? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. You want to sever all financial and legal ties? Right here, right now? God, yes, Kingston groaned. Just sign it so I can go to lunch. Violetta clicked the pen. She signed the acknowledgement of service with a flourish. She handed the pen and the clipboard back to him. Done, she said. I'm served. We are effectively separated. Finally, Kingston smirked, tucking the documents under his arm. See? That wasn't so hard. Good luck with the job hunt. I hear the local community college is hiring lab assistants. He turned on his heel to walk away. At that exact moment, a sleek, black convoy of 3 Cadillac Escalades screeched to a halt right in front of them, mounting the curb of the university walkway. Kingston jumped back, startled. Hey, watch where you're going. The doors of the SUVs flew open. 6 men in dark suits with earpieces stepped out, scanning the perimeter. Then, from the middle vehicle, a tall, silver-haired man stepped out. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Kingston's car. It was Arthur Penhaligon, the CEO of Corp Industries, one of the most famous venture capitalists in the Western world. Kingston knew his face from the cover of Forbes. He had practically worshipped the man from afar. Kingston's jaw dropped. He straightened his tie, assuming the billionaire was here for the university dean, or perhaps a lost dignitary. He stepped forward, putting on his best salesman smile. Mr. Penhaligon, Kingston said, extending a hand. What an honor. I'm Kingston Vance, Vice President at Stratos Banking. If you're looking for the administration building... Arthur Penhaligon didn't even look at Kingston. He walked right past him, brushing Kingston's extended hand aside with his shoulder. Arthur walked straight up to Violetta. Kingston watched in confusion. Why is he walking toward Violetta? Is she in his way? Arthur stopped in front of Violetta, who was still holding her graduation cap. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of immense respect. "Dr. Claremont," Arthur said, his voice deep and commanding. "My apologies for the intrusion. My team told me you weren't answering your phone, and we couldn't risk the Japanese investors getting cold feet. We need your signature on the final term sheet immediately." Kingston froze. He blinked, looking between the billionaire and his wife. "Dr. Claremont? Violetta?" Violetta ignored Kingston. She looked at Arthur. "Mr. Penhaligon, I was occupied. Is the valuation still holding?" "It went up," Arthur said, snapping his fingers. An assistant rushed forward, opening a leather portfolio on a portable table they set up right on the sidewalk. "BioX countered at $750. We are prepared to offer $800 million for the exclusive rights to the Ether protocol. An all-cash deal, 50% upfront, deposited into your account within the hour." Kingston felt the blood drain from his face. The world started to spin. 800 million. "Wait," Kingston stammered, stepping back into the circle. "Violetta, what is this? What protocol?" Arthur Penhaligon finally looked at Kingston, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "Who is this? Is he part of your legal counsel, Dr. Claremont? If so, he needs to be vetted." Violetta looked at Kingston. She looked at the divorce papers tucked under his arm. She looked at Chloe, who was now peeking out from behind a pillar, eyes wide with shock. Violetta smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "No, Mr. Penhaligon," Violetta said clearly. "He is not my counsel. That is my ex-husband. We just separated 5 minutes ago. He has no claim to my assets." She turned to Kingston. "You wanted me to contribute to society, Kingston? I just cured cellular decay. And you wanted me to sign those papers so you wouldn't have to pay alimony? Don't worry. I won't ask you for a dime." She picked up the gold Mont Blanc pen, the one Kingston had lent her to sign her own divorce, and bent over the billion-dollar contract. "Violetta, wait!" Kingston lunged forward, panic erupting in his chest. "Baby, wait! I didn't mean it! We haven't filed them yet! Violetta!" 2 of Arthur's security guards stepped in front of Kingston, blocking him like a wall of granite. "Step back, sir," one of them rumbled. "That's my wife!" Kingston screamed, sweat pouring down his forehead. "That's my money! We're married!" Violetta signed the document. She blew on the ink to dry it. She handed the portfolio back to Arthur. "Thank you, Arthur," she said. "I'm ready to go now." "Excellent," Arthur said, gesturing to the open door of the Escalade. "We have champagne on ice, and the legal team is waiting to restructure your holding company." Violetta climbed into the luxury SUV. She didn't look back. Kingston stood on the sidewalk, clutching the divorce papers that saved him $2,000 a month, while watching $800 million drive away. But the story wasn't over. As the dust settled, Kingston's phone rang. It was the CEO of Stratos Banking. "Vance?" the CEO barked. "Where the hell are you? I just got a call from Corp Industries. They're pulling all their assets from our bank. They said something about you insulting their new lead partner. Vance, if we lose this account, you're not just fired, you're finished." Kingston dropped the phone. It cracked on the pavement, right next to the divorce papers. The silence in Kingston Moore's office was deafening. Just 24 hours ago, this glass-walled corner office on the 45th floor of the Stratos Banking Tower had been his kingdom. It was where he drank scotch, looked down on the ants scurrying in the streets below, and plotted his ascent to the C-suite. Now it felt like a mausoleum. A security guard named Frank, a man Kingston had walked past without acknowledging for 5 years, stood by the door. Frank's arms were crossed, his face impassive. "Mr. Moore," Frank said, his voice flat. "HR said you have 5 more minutes to collect your personal effects. The company laptop stays." Kingston shoved a framed photo of himself, golfing into a cardboard box. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped it. "This is a mistake, Frank. A massive misunderstanding. When the CEO hears, the CEO is the one who called security, sir," Frank interrupted, checking his watch. 4 minutes. Kingston felt bile rise in his throat. The humiliation was physical, a burning sensation under his skin. It had happened so fast, Arthur Penhaligon hadn't just pulled Corp Industries' accounts, he had made a few phone calls. In the world of high finance, reputation was currency, and Kingston's currency had just crashed. He was radioactive. He grabbed his stapler, his expensive fountain pens, and the gold nameplate that read Kingston Moore, Vice President. He left the photo of Violetta in the drawer. He hadn't looked at it in months anyway, and after yesterday, the mere thought of her made him want to vomit with rage. 800 million. The number looped in his brain like a fever dream. He walked out of the building, clutching his box, ignoring the whispers of the junior analysts who used to fear him. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, the same sidewalk where he used to park his Bentley. But the Bentley was gone. The repo men hadn't come yet, but the lease was tied to his corporate compensation package. It was only a matter of days. He hailed a taxi, feeling like a peasant. "Downtown," he barked. "The law offices of Hardwick and Associates." He wasn't going home to wallow. He was going to war. Rexford Hardwick was not a nice man. He was known in the city as the Hyena. He didn't take cases based on justice. He took them based on the size of the kill. His office smelled of old leather and cigar smoke, a stark contrast to the sterile corporate air Kingston was used to. Rexford sat behind a mahogany desk, reading the copy of the divorce papers Kingston had slammed down in front of him. The lawyer was a small man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to count money every time he blinked. "Let me get this straight," Rexford said, his voice raspy. "You served her before she signed the deal?" "Yes," Kingston admitted, pacing the room. "I wanted to cut ties. I thought she was a liability. She tricked me, Rexford. She knew. She must have known the deal was closing that day." Rexford chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "She didn't trick you, Kingston. You played yourself. You were so eager to avoid paying her a few grand in alimony that you signed away your rights to a billion-dollar fortune." "Don't tell me what I did," Kingston snapped. "Tell me how to fix it. We were still married when she developed the technology, right? That Project Ether, or whatever. She worked on it for 6 years. We were married for 7. That makes it community property. Half of that 800 million is mine." Rexford leaned back, tenting his fingers. "Technically, yes. Intellectual property created during the marriage is a marital asset. But," he tapped the divorce decree. "You established the date of separation as yesterday morning. The deal closed yesterday afternoon. She can argue the asset didn't have liquid value until after the separation." "That's semantics," Kingston screamed. "The law is semantics," Rexford countered calmly. "However, if we can prove she negotiated the deal while you were together and acted in bad faith to hide the asset from you, we can petition to nullify the separation agreement. We can claim fraud." Kingston stopped pacing. "Fraud? Yes. If she knew the value and didn't disclose it on her financial affidavit, she committed perjury. We can sue for 50%. Hell, in some judges' eyes, if the fraud is egregious enough, we can sue for the whole damn thing as a penalty." Kingston's eyes lit up. The despair that had been drowning him evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp greed. She didn't disclose it. She put student as her occupation. She listed her income as 0. Rexford smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "Then we have her. But Kingston, Listen to me closely. This woman isn't the meek student you remember anymore. She has Penhaligon backing her. She has a war chest of nearly $1 billion. She is going to bury you in paper. This will get ugly. Are you ready for that? Kingston thought about the security guard escorting him out. He thought about the sneer on Arthur Penhaligon's face. He thought of Violeta, looking at him with that newfound, terrifying pity. "I don't care how ugly it gets," Kingston hissed. "I want what's mine. I want to see her break." "Good," Rexford said, opening a drawer and pulling out a retainer agreement. "My fee is $5,000 an hour, plus 20% of the settlement. Sign here." Kingston signed. He had just sold his soul to the hyena, but he didn't care. He was going to get his money. 3 weeks later, Violeta stood on the balcony of the penthouse suite at the St. Regis. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't shiver. She was wearing a cashmere wrap that cost more than her old Honda Civic. Below her, the city lights twinkled like diamonds, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't looking up at them wishing for more. She was looking down. "The board is ready for you, Dr. Claremont." Violeta turned. Arthur Penhaligon stood in the doorway, holding 2 flutes of champagne. In the week since the graduation, Arthur had become more than a business partner. He was a mentor, a father figure she had never had. He had guided her through the shark-infested waters of high-stakes finance, teaching her that being nice was a liability and being respected was a necessity. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, taking the glass. "Do I look okay?" She was wearing a structured white suit, tailored to perfection. Gone were the oversized sweaters and the messy buns. Violeta looked sharp, lethal, and expensive. "You look like a CEO," Arthur corrected gently. "But remember, Violeta, today isn't about science. It's about power. The board of the Preservation Trust needs to know that you aren't just a brain in a jar. They need to know you can lead." "I can lead," Violeta said, her voice steady. "I spent 6 years managing volatile chemical reactions. Managing a room full of old men in suits can't be that much harder." Arthur laughed. "You'd be surprised. But there is one other matter." He pulled a tablet from his jacket pocket. "We received a notification this morning. A temporary restraining order on your assets." Violeta's face hardened. "Kingston." "And his lawyer, Rexford Hardwick." Arthur nodded grimly. "They've filed a motion claiming you committed bankruptcy fraud and hid assets during the divorce. They've convinced a judge to freeze 50% of the initial payout until the hearing." Violeta walked over to the marble island in the center of the room and set her glass down. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The old Violeta would have panicked. The new Violeta just felt a cold, calculating anger. "He thinks he can starve me out," she said softly. "He thinks I'm still the girl who had to ask him for grocery money." "He's desperate," Arthur said. "He lost his job at Stratos. He's leveraging everything on this lawsuit. If he loses, he's destitute. If he wins, he's set for life." Violeta tapped her fingernails on the marble. "He's suing me for hiding assets. That's his angle." "It's a strong angle, legally," Arthur warned. "You didn't list the patent on the divorce papers." "Because it wasn't mine yet," Violeta snapped, turning around. "The university owned the patent. The deal with you was an acquisition of the university's rights with a royalty transfer to me after I formed the LLC, which I did at 4:00 p.m. 2 hours after he served me." "I know that, and you know that," Arthur soothed. "But a jury might see it differently. They might see a wife scheming to cut her husband out of a windfall. Perception is reality, Violeta." Violeta closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought about the 6 years of neglect, the way Kingston would check his phone during dinner, the way he made her feel small so he could feel big. He didn't want the money because he earned it. He wanted it because he felt entitled to own her, and by extension, everything she created. She opened her eyes. They were clear and dangerous. "Arthur," she said, "you told me that Corp Industries has a private intelligence division for corporate espionage defense." "We do. I want a full audit on Kingston Moore. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, and what he spends his money on. And I want to know about Chloe." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "The mistress?" "Kingston is arrogant," Violetta said. "He makes mistakes when he thinks no one is watching. If he wants to play in the mud, I'm not going to just get dirty. I'm going to bury him in it." "I'll make the call," Arthur said, a hint of pride in his voice. "And Arthur?" Violetta added, picking up her champagne again. "Call the bank, the one that holds the mortgage on the house Kingston kicked me out of. Who owns that debt?" Arthur tapped on his tablet for a moment. "It's bundled in a security package managed by, ironically, a subsidiary of Stratos." "Buy it," Violetta said. Arthur froze. "Excuse me?" "Buy the debt," Violetta repeated. "I want to be the one holding the note on his house. If he misses a single payment, I want to be the one who signs the foreclosure notice." Arthur stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "Remind me never to cross you, Dr. Claremont." "Shall we go to the board meeting?" Violetta asked, smoothing her jacket. "I believe I have an empire to build." The war between Violetta and Kingston didn't happen on a battlefield. It happened in conference rooms filled with expensive coffee and passive-aggressive lawyers. The discovery phase of a lawsuit is intended to be a fact-finding mission. Both sides are required to turn over emails, text messages, and financial records. For Kingston, it was a treasure hunt. He was convinced he would find a smoking gun. An email from Violetta to Arthur dated months ago, proving a conspiracy. For Violetta, it was a dissection. She sat in the conference room of her new legal team's office. She had hired Lydia Thorne. Wait, Thorne is banned. Correction, Lydia Cross, the most feared matrimonial attorney in the state. Lydia was a woman who wore red lipstick like war paint and had divorced 3 senators without losing a single battle. "Look at this," Lydia said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. "This is Kingston's credit card statement from 3 years ago." Violetta picked it up. Her eyes scanned the lines. The Sapphire Lounge, Hotel de Ville, Tiffany & Co. "He bought a diamond bracelet," Violetta whispered. "December 12th, 3 years ago." "Did you receive a diamond bracelet that Christmas?" Lydia asked. "No," Violetta said, her voice trembling slightly. "I got a blender." "And look at the dates," Lydia pointed out. "These hotel charges. They coincide with his business trips to Chicago. But the charges are local. He never went to Chicago, Violetta. He was staying at the Hotel de Ville, 20 minutes from your house." Violetta felt sick. It wasn't just Chloe. This had been going on for years. While she was pulling all-nighters in the lab, eating vending machine crackers to save money for their future, Kingston had been spending thousands on women, jewelry, and hotels. "This is good," Lydia said, her tone clinical. "This proves dissipation of marital assets. He was spending community money on extramarital affairs. We can use this to offset any claim he has on your money. In fact, we can argue he owes you money." "It's not enough," Violetta said, dropping the papers. "He doesn't care about the past. He cares about the 800 million. He'll argue that a few jewelry bills are nothing compared to what I'm worth now." "True," Lydia admitted. "But we found something else. Something much more interesting." Lydia pulled up a photo on the large screen at the end of the room. It was a scanned document. a handwritten note on a napkin, dated 6 months prior. "Where did you get this?" Violetta asked. "Arthur's team," Lydia said. They did a deep dive into Kingston's old work emails. He was careless. He scanned this to his work server to save it. The note was a scribble of numbers. At the top it said, "Project Ether, potential valuation." Below it, in Kingston's handwriting, were notes, "Biotech sector booming. If she sells, value approx 5 toos at 10 mehosas. Wait until she finishes PhD to file." Violetta stared at the screen. The air left her lungs. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew about the project." "He didn't know it was worth 800 million, Lydia clarified. "He thought it was worth 5 or 10. But look at the note. Wait until she finishes PhD to file." This proves premeditation, Violetta. He wasn't divorcing you because you were a burden. He was timing the divorce to ensure you finished the work, thinking he could take half of a smaller sum. Or perhaps he decided to cut you loose before you got rich so he wouldn't have to deal with your success. But it proves he was aware of the asset and chose to ignore it in the legal filing. "He tried to game the system," Violetta realized. "He thought if he divorced me right before I made it, he could claim he didn't know, or he just wanted out. But this proves he was calculating the value." "Exactly," Lydia grinned. "He waived his claim to your future earnings in the divorce decree because he thought those earnings would be a salary. He gambled, and now that he lost the gamble, he's trying to change the rules. This napkin proves he made an informed decision to leave you. He can't claim ignorance." Violetta stood up. She walked to the window. "He treated my life like a stock option," she said, her voice cold. "He tried to short-sell me." "And now," Lydia said, closing the folder, "we are going to squeeze him." Meanwhile, in a dingy apartment on the outskirts of the city, Kingston was unraveling. Chloe was packing a suitcase. "Where are you going?" Kingston demanded, standing in the doorway in his bathrobe. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. The apartment was a far cry from the condo they used to share. It smelled of stale takeout. "I'm leaving Kingston," Chloe said, throwing her makeup bag into the case. "This isn't what I signed up for." "You signed up for me," Kingston shouted. "We're a team." "I signed up for a VP at Stratos Banking," Chloe shot back, spinning around. "I didn't sign up for a broke, unemployed guy who spends all day screaming at his lawyer on the phone. You told me you were going to be rich, Kingston. You told me you were going to take half her money." "I am," Kingston pleaded, grabbing her arm. "Rexford says we have a case. The hearing is next week. Once I get the settlement, we can go anywhere. Paris. Tokyo." Chloe yanked her arm away. She looked at him with pure disgust. "I saw the news, Kingston. Corp Industries just bought the building your lawyer works in. Violetta's company is acquiring everything. She's unstoppable. You're going to lose, and I'm not going down with you." She zipped up the bag. "And by the way, that diamond bracelet you gave me last year, I pawned it. It was fake, just like you." The door slammed shut, leaving Kingston alone in the silence. He stood there for a long time, the sound of the door echoing in his ears. Fake. He walked over to the cheap laminate table where his laptop sat open. He pulled up the court docket. The hearing was set for Tuesday. Judge Soloway, Western. A tough judge. Kingston's eyes drifted to the bottle of whiskey on the counter. He poured himself a glass, his hand trembling. He had lost his job. He had lost his mistress. He had lost his reputation. But he still had one card to play. A card Rexford had told him to save for the absolute last resort. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. "Hello?" a voice answered. It was a journalist for the City Chronicle, a tabloid known for sleazy exposés. "This is Kingston Moore," Kingston said, his voice slurring slightly. "I want to sell a story. The true story of Violetta Claremont, the genius scientist. Yeah, I want to tell you about how she stole that idea from her dying professor. I want to tell you she's a fraud. It was a lie, a complete, total fabrication. But Kingston knew that in the court of public opinion, the truth didn't matter. Only the scandal did. If he could destroy her reputation, maybe Corp Industries would back out. Maybe the deal would collapse. If he couldn't have the money, nobody would." "I'm listening," the journalist said. Kingston took a sip of whiskey and began to burn down the only good thing he had ever been close to. Violetta woke up on Monday morning to her phone blowing up. She had 40 missed calls from Arthur, 10 from Lydia, and hundreds of notifications from social media. She sat up in her silk sheets, rubbing her eyes. She tapped the news alert on her screen. Scandal in the lab. Is the billion-dollar Ether protocol stolen? Ex-husband alleges fraud and theft. Violetta gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She scrolled down. The article was vicious. It claimed she had been a failing student who seduced her professor, stole his notes after he passed away, and claimed the work as her own. It quoted an anonymous source close to the family. Clearly Kingston. It was all lies. Her professor, Dr. Holloway, was still alive and was actually on her advisory board. He had mentored her. But the internet didn't care. The comment section was already filled with hate. Another fake genius. She probably slept her way to the top. Justice for the husband. Violetta threw the phone across the bed. She felt like she couldn't breathe. He was attacking her integrity, her life's work. There was a knock on her front door. Not the polite knock of room service, but a heavy, urgent pounding. Violetta threw on a robe and ran to the door. She checked the security camera. It was Arthur. She opened the door. Arthur looked furious. He walked in, followed by 2 members of his crisis management team. "Don't look at the internet," Arthur commanded. "Too late," Violetta said, her voice shaking. "He's lying, Arthur. You know he's lying. Dr. Holloway is literally coming to the launch party next week." "We know," Arthur said, pacing the living room. "We've already issued a statement. Dr. Holloway is recording a video rebuttal right now. We will sue the newspaper for libel. But that's not the problem." "What's the problem?" "The problem is the investors," Arthur said, stopping and looking at her. "The Japanese consortium. They are very sensitive to scandal. They've put the second tranche of funding on hold until this is cleared up." Violetta sank onto the sofa. "He's doing this to destroy the deal. If the deal falls through, there's no money for him to take. But there's no money for me either. It's a suicide mission." "He's scorched earth," Arthur agreed. "He knows he can't win in court with the evidence we have, so he's trying to force a settlement. He thinks you'll pay him just to make it stop." Violetta looked down at her hands. They were the hands that had pipetted thousands of samples. Hands that had written equations on whiteboards until they bled. "He wants me to pay him off?" Violetta asked quietly. "Rexford called Lydia this morning," Arthur confirmed. "They offered to drop the lawsuit and retract the statement to the press for a consulting fee of $50 million. $50 million. It was a ransom. Violetta stood up. The fear in her chest was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was the same resolve she felt when an experiment failed and she had to start over from scratch. "No," Violetta said. "Violetta," Arthur warned. "It might be the easiest way. The Japanese investors—" "I said no," Violetta interrupted, her voice rising. "I am not paying that man a single cent. He wants a show? He wants to drag this into the light?" She walked over to her closet and pulled out the dress she had bought for the gala. It was black, severe armor. "Get Dr. Holloway on the phone," Violetta ordered, "and get the camera crew ready. We aren't just issuing a statement. We're going live." "What are you going to do?" Arthur asked. "I'm going to do what I should have done at graduation," Violetta said. "I'm going to defend my thesis. But this time, I'm going to grade him." The Honorable Judge Soloway's courtroom was packed to capacity. It wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a spectacle. The City Chronicle's smear campaign had done its job. Half the city was here to see the fraudulent genius get taken down by her wronged husband. Kingston sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a suit he had bought on a credit card he knew would be declined by tomorrow. He looked pale but determined. Beside him, Rexford Hardwick sat like a coiled snake, arranging his files with predatory precision. On the defense side, Violetta sat next to Lydia Cross. Violetta wore the same black dress she had worn during her live stream rebuttal, a garment that looked less like clothing and more like armor. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at the cameras. She stared straight ahead at the judge's empty chair. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Soloway entered. He was a man known for his impatience with theatrics, which made Rexford's strategy risky. "Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. Moore v. Claremont, petition for asset reallocation and allegations of fraud." Rexford stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He stood behind his desk, leaning forward on his knuckles. "Your Honor," Rexford began, his voice rasping through the silent room, "we are here because of a simple, ugly truth. Marriage is a partnership. It is a contract of mutual support. For 7 years, my client, Mr. Moore, supported Dr. Claremont. He paid for the roof over her head. He paid for the food on her table. He paid the tuition that allowed her to obtain the very degree she now uses to generate wealth." Kingston nodded solemnly, dabbing his eye with a handkerchief. "And how did she repay him?" Rexford continued, pointing a bony finger at Violetta. "By engaging in a calculated conspiracy to defraud him. She negotiated the sale of Project Ether, a marital asset developed during the marriage in secret. She waited until the ink was dry on a hasty, coerced separation agreement to sign the deal, effectively stealing $400 million from the man who made her success possible," the gallery murmured. "It was a compelling story." "We have bank records," Rexford said, waving a file, "showing zero income from Dr. Claremont for 6 years. We have testimony that she spent every waking hour in the lab, time subsidized by Mr. Moore. We ask the court to pierce the corporate veil of her new LLC, nullify the separation agreement based on bad faith, and award Mr. Moore his rightful 50% share." Judge Soloway looked at Violetta's table. "Ms. Cross, your opening." Lydia Cross stood up. She didn't shout. She didn't point. She simply walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor," Lydia said smoothly. "Mr. Hardwick tells a touching story about a supportive husband. But we are not here for stories. We are here for timelines, and the timeline tells a very different story." Lydia clicked a remote. A large screen on the wall illuminated. "Exhibit A," Lydia said, "the separation agreement, signed by Mr. Moore on June 15th at 1:45 p.m. Note the clause he insisted upon. Each party retained sole ownership of any assets or debts in their name as of the moment of signing." He wrote that clause himself. "Because he didn't know about the billion-dollar asset she was hiding," Rexford shouted. "Did he not?" Lydia asked. "Exhibit B." The screen changed. It showed the scanned image of the napkin Kingston had written on 6 months prior, the one found in his work scans. Project Ether. If she sells, value approx 5 × 10 meters. Wait until she finishes PhD to file. The courtroom gasped. Kingston froze. He hadn't told Rexford about the napkin. He had forgotten he'd even scanned it. Mr. Moore knew exactly what Project Ether was, Lydia said, her voice turning to ice. He estimated its value at $10 million. He timed the divorce specifically to capture that value, or, when he realized he wanted to leave her for his mistress, he decided to cut her loose early to avoid what he thought would be a mere $10 million, preferring to keep his own salary and avoid alimony. He gambled, Your Honor. He bet against his wife. And now that she outperformed his estimate by 8,000%, he wants a do-over. Judge Soloway peered over his glasses at Kingston. Mr. Hardwick, can you explain why your client claimed total ignorance of the project in his affidavit when this document exists? Rexford glared at Kingston. My client was merely speculating on potential academic grants, Your Honor. This proves nothing about the specific deal with Corp Industries. It proves intent, Lydia countered. But if you want to talk about the Corp deal, let's talk about the smear campaign. Lydia signaled to the bailiff. Defense calls Dr. Elias Holloway to the stand. The doors opened, and an elderly man in a wheelchair was wheeled in. It was Dr. Holloway, the man the City Chronicle article claimed Violetta had stolen from. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. Rexford looked nervous. Objection. Relevance? The plaintiff claiming my client is a fraud is the basis of his public argument, Lydia said. We are establishing the legitimacy of the asset. Overruled, the judge said. Dr. Holloway took the oath. Dr. Holloway, Lydia asked gently, did Violetta Claremont steal Project Ether from you? Steal it? The old man laughed, a wheezing sound. She saved it. I gave up on that formula 5 years ago. I told her it was impossible. Violetta worked on it in the university basement when the heating was off. She worked on it when her husband refused to pick her up from the lab at 2 a.m. She built that protocol from the ground up. I am merely a signatory on the academic papers. The intellectual property is hers and hers alone. The university agreed to transfer the rights to her because she was the sole inventor. And what do you think of Mr. Moore's claims? Dr. Holloway looked at Kingston. I remember you. You came to the lab once. Christmas party 4 years ago. You asked me if there was any real money in biology. When I said it was mostly for the pursuit of knowledge, you laughed and called my students nerds. You didn't support her, young man. You tolerated her. And now you want to harvest a crop you didn't plant. No further questions, Lydia said. Rexford didn't bother to cross-examine. He knew the jury and the judge were turning. But Rexford was a fighter. Your Honor, Rexford said, regardless of who invented it, the deal was signed during the marriage. The timestamp on the Corp Industries contract is 3:00 p.m. The divorce papers were filed at the courthouse at 4:30 p.m. Legally, they were married when she became a billionaire. This was the technicality they were hanging on, the gap between signing the separation agreement and the official filing. Violetta leaned over to Lydia. Play the tape. Lydia stood up. Your Honor, regarding the plaintiff's motivation for this lawsuit, we would like to enter Exhibit C, a recording of a phone call received by my office 3 days ago from Mr. Hardwick. Rexford's face went white. Objection. Settlement negotiations are privileged. Not when they involve extortion, Lydia said calmly. I will hear it in chambers, the judge said initially, but then looked at Rexford's panic. Actually, if it pertains to the credibility of the plaintiff, play it. Lydia pressed play. The audio boomed through the courtroom speakers. Rexford's voice. Look, Lydia, we know the fraud claim is shaky, but the Japanese investors are getting nervous about the bad press. Tell your client we'll make the stolen idea story go away for $50 million. Consider it a consulting fee. If not, Kingston is going to go on every talk show in the country and say she's a thief. Lydia's voice. So this isn't about the marital asset? It's blackmail? Rexford's voice. Call it what you want. My client is broke and angry. $50 million is a drop in the bucket for her. Pay it, or we burn her reputation. Silence filled the courtroom. Total, suffocating silence. Kingston stared at the table, his face burning red. He hadn't known Rexford was that explicit. Judge Soloway slowly took off his glasses. He looked at Rexford Hardwick with an expression of pure loathing. "Mr. Hardwick," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "did you just admit on tape to using the press to extort a defendant?" "It was aggressive negotiation, Your Honor," Rexford stammered. "It is an abuse of my courtroom," Judge Soloway roared, slamming his hand on the bench. Judge Soloway's ruling was swift and brutal. "Mr. Moore, you signed a separation agreement to avoid alimony based on your own underestimation of your wife's worth," the judge declared. "That is not fraud, that is regret, and the court does not cure regret." He denied the petition, ruling the asset belonged solely to Violetta. Then came the sanctions. Citing the attempted blackmail, Soloway ordered Kingston to pay $450,000 in legal fees and referred his lawyer to the state bar. The gavel banged, signaling the end of Kingston's life as he knew it. His lawyer fled, leaving Kingston alone at the table. Violetta approached him, her expression unreadable. "Violetta," Kingston whispered, panic setting in. "I can't pay the fees. Please, you have millions. Let it go." "I have my future," Violetta corrected softly. "You have a debt." She leaned closer, her voice ice cold. "I bought the mortgage on your condo, Kingston. You missed your payment yesterday. I'm initiating foreclosure in the morning." As horror washed over his face, she delivered the final blow. "I invest in distressed assets, and you, Kingston, are a very distressed asset." She turned and walked out, leaving him in the ruins of his own greed. 6 months later, the launch of the Claremont Institute was the event of the decade. Violetta stood before Nobel laureates, her gold phoenix logo glowing behind her. "Science is about believing in the invisible until it becomes visible," she told the cheering crowd. Later, a waitress tapped her shoulder. It was Chloe, Kingston's former mistress, looking exhausted in a catering uniform. "Dr. Claremont," she stammered. "I just wanted to say congratulations. I left him, you know." Violetta knew. Reports confirmed Kingston was bankrupt, living above a garage, and working the night shift at a car rental agency. The man who once demanded perfection was now serving economy sedans to businessmen who treated him like furniture. "I'm sorry for everything," Chloe whispered. Violetta felt no anger, only indifference. She placed a $100 bill on Chloe's tray. "Keep the change," she said coolly, turning back to her billionaire partners. "Is everything all right?" Arthur asked. Violetta looked at the skyline, the weight of the past finally gone. She had lost a toxic husband, but built an empire. "Everything is perfect," she replied. She was finally free. And that is the incredible story of Violetta and Kingston. Talk about instant karma. Kingston tried to squeeze her for every penny, and he ended up serving rental cars while she changed the world. It just goes to show, never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone loading their weapon. I want to know what you would have done. Would you have forgiven Kingston? Or was Violetta right to foreclose on his house and leave him with nothing? I think she was absolutely justified, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and success, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story about karma hitting hard. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.